Hi, my name's Isaac, and this is my new to me 2016 Toyota Tacoma TRD Off-Road. And today, I'm going to tell you guys why I bought this third generation truck instead of buying a fourth generation Tacoma, or any other vehicle for that matter. But before I talk about that, if you've been a long-time viewer of my channel, you might be thinking, Isaac, what happened to your other Tacoma? And that is a very good question. The very first car-related video I ever filmed was with my 2019 Toyota Tacoma SR5 in cement gray Thumper. I named him Thumper because he was the same color as the rabbit from Bambi, and I'm not a particularly huge Bambi fan. I don't think I've seen it since I was a kid, but I thought it was a cool name. And that video with Thumper really blew up. I think it got 170-some thousand views, and that kick-started my journey to becoming an automotive journalist. I thought, wow, this video got a lot of views. Maybe I could do this with other cars, and it just went from there. Subsequently, I also did yearly update videos on my truck where I got to be goofier and more silly, and I just did a lot of cutaway jokes. It was a highlight of my year. I loved being able to do the yearly update videos. But then, on a dark and snowy night a few months ago, I was driving down this road, and the township had been out to plow and put salt down. But as I crested the top of this hill, I hit a patch of black ice, and I lost control of my truck. As I slid across the double yellow, I decided to aim for this drainage ditch because I figured since an accident was now inevitable, this might soften the blow. But it didn't. It actually hooked my truck and spun me across this intersection, and I came to rest against this telephone pole and this weight limit sign right here. It was an incredibly abrupt stop, but miraculously, I am completely unharmed. I didn't even get whiplash from this accident, but unfortunately, my truck was totaled. It took the entire brunt of the accident. I do personally believe in God, and I think God saved my life here. Because if I wouldn't have hit the drainage ditch right here, I would have continued to sail straight on, and you can see there's no guardrail right here. And if we walk down here, my truck would have kept going, and I very well could have flown off this 30-foot drop, but I didn't. I was completely okay. My truck was lost in this accident, but I'm so grateful to be unharmed. Now, I of course was still heartbroken that I had lost my truck. Initially, we weren't sure if the truck was going to be salvageable or not because it didn't look horrific. The bed had a big dent in it and the front end was messed up, but we weren't sure if that would total it. Eventually we found out that there was some pretty severe hidden cab damage, even though there wasn't any frame damage, and the insurance company decided that is just too much, it's too risky, and so they gave me a payout. I remember this little dent right here, this little scratch. Kid threw a rock at my truck right after I bought it, and I got so mad because my truck was new and now it was scratched up, and you could barely even tell I put color matched paint over it. And I remember at the time going, I shouldn't be so upset about this, because no matter how much I take care of this truck, no matter how much I baby it, no matter what, it's gonna end up in a scrapyard in 30 years. That's what happens to cars. And I didn't think it would be this soon, 4.5 years in, but here we are. Now, to give you guys an idea of how good this payout was, without giving you the exact number, it was about $4,000 less than this truck stickered for brand new. Brand new! And I bought the truck with a trade-in, so the payment for my used truck was actually more than I had initially paid for it when I bought it back in 2019. It was crazy. With this money, I figured I would absolutely be able to find another cement gray Tacoma, and I'd be on my way. The car market has slowly begun to downturn, where cars are getting a little bit more affordable and they're not as expensive as they were over the last couple of years. But Tacomas really hold their value insanely well. Tacomas are really strange because you'd think the top trim trucks would be more expensive on the used market than the base model work truck SRs. Not the case. Toyota Tacomas really are Toyota Tacomas. And so they hold very high values no matter the features. I think a lot of people looking for these trucks don't necessarily care about all of the features. They don't need to have all the bells and whistles. And so it was just very difficult to find a solid used third gen within my price range. Then my dad suggested, well, why don't you look at a fourth gen one? And I had been thinking of that, but I didn't really want to pay over what I was given. I figured I could find a truck within that, but I said, you know what, I will look at a fourth gen. If I have to pay a couple thousand extra, at least I have a brand new truck. So I did the configurator on Toyota's website, and I equipped a truck exactly like my third gen SR5 was equipped. And it was about $9,000 more expensive than my truck was. And I'm like, no way I'm paying that much. That's the quickest answer to why I didn't buy a fourth generation. I thought it was not worth the price increase because I wasn't even getting more features. I was just getting the same truck for more money. And it didn't have a power sliding rear window. That was an additional option. That was really frustrating. It was like they took away some options. And I said, you know what? I just don't think this is viable for me, even though it would be exciting to have this new truck. Eventually I was scrolling and I found a Nissan Frontier that was a really good deal. And it was a new body style. And I had always wanted a sunroof. I really wanted a sunroof, and this Nissan Frontier had that. And so I went out and called them, but they had already sold that truck. It was a really good deal. And I looked at 4Runners because I said, okay, maybe I won't get a Tacoma. Looked at 4Runners, drove a 4Runner. They're nice, but they're ancient. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to get this. And I figured the new body style of the 4Runner would be equally as expensive as the Tacoma. And I briefly considered an Alfa Romeo Giulia because they're so cheap, because they're not very good cars. But I mean, just imagine, just to have an Alfa Romeo Giulia for even a year. I know that would be so unwise and bad in my spending, but I thought it would be fun to say Alpha Shark in an Alfa Romeo. So I kind of circled back to the Tacoma and I looked again, and I was scrolling. I saw this truck listed as a base model SR. And I was like, that's not an SR. I think that's a TRD off-road. So I clicked the link for this truck, and it was a TRD off-road, and just however it was listed, it had been mislisted as this base model. So when you were looking, if you didn't select all trims, this truck wouldn't have come up. And it was a great deal. It wasn't like a suspiciously good deal, but it was very good, especially because it had the heated seats and the sunroof, the premium package. Fairly low miles, all things considered. When I bought it, it had 96,000, and I wanted something under 100,000. So I was like, okay, that's cutting it close, but that is within my range. And so I called the dealership, and they were like, yes, we still have the truck. And I was like, awesome, I will come tonight to look at this truck. And it was in New York. And I worried, because it was in New York, that it might have a lot of rust. Maybe that's why it was a little bit less expensive. So I asked them to send me pictures of the frame, and they did. And it was actually really clean. There was a little bit of rust, but just surface. And I was like, no way. And they're like, yeah, we took this as a trade-in. It was one owner. He took really good care of it. And I was like, oh my word, this might be the truck. So I go out and I test drive it, and it drives just like my Tacoma, of course, same engine and everything. And it's a little bit older, being a 2016, but I was okay with that. I didn't feel like I needed the Toyota Safety Sense technology. That was something that was cool, but it was more of a gimmick for me. And then in the future, I figured less stuff to go wrong as the truck ages. And put a down payment on it, came back a couple days later and brought the cashier's check and bought the truck. It was so cool. I was so happy. I will briefly say the process of registering a vehicle in Pennsylvania that you purchased from New York is an absolute nightmare, and I would literally never recommend it to anyone. I'm just so grateful to be back behind the wheel of a Tacoma. So now that I've owned my truck for a little over a month, there are 3 things I want to talk about really quickly. 2 of them are really fascinating. I think you're going to be just bamboozled by them like I was. The first thing I want to talk about, though, is the grille. Now, the TRD Off-Road originally came with an entirely chrome grille for the 2016 model year, and I hated it. I did not like the look of it at all. Technically, this center part was a very light gray, but you couldn't really tell, and I just thought there was too much chrome. So I ended up painting this center part of the grille, but it started to chip with rocks, and I was like, oh man, this just doesn't work very well. What can I do to make this not chip, but still retain this blacked out look? Well, I ended up using truck bed liner, and it actually turned out pretty good, and it hasn't chipped yet. It's not a perfect look, but from 5 feet away, it looks pretty good. That's number 1. Number 2 is that this truck does not have a power sliding rear window. It's a manually operated one. Though down here, there is a blank switch where the power sliding rear window would go, except the 2016 model year did not have the option for it at all, not even on the top limited trim. It didn't come around till 2017. But Toyota clearly must have been developing it because the button is there. So like they knew eventually they were gonna figure it out, and so they were like, put a blank switch there because that's where it will go. And eventually, by the time they started making the 2019s, which I owned, they moved that power sliding rear window button to the center over here. Number 3, this truck included a factory GoPro mount. That was kind of a tie-in promotion with GoPro because they figured, oh man, you're gonna be off-roading and you'll want a GoPro for your truck. And that's a really neat thing, but eventually that was phased out on these trucks. My guess is probably because people weren't using it that often, or they needed to put that safety sense system here, and it just didn't really work to also have the GoPro mount. That's almost going to wrap up this video, but not quite yet. There's still one more part of this story that I'd like to share. I wanted to save it until the end. As I mentioned a little earlier in the video, I believe in God. I am a professing Christian, and in my yearly Tacoma update videos, I often talked about how God was moving in my life, and in some cases, He used my truck to teach me a lesson. And now my Tacoma is gone, but God still taught me an incredibly valuable lesson through that process, and I want to share that with you guys today. Right after the accident, I immediately began searching for another cement gray Tacoma. I wanted to replace my truck with exactly what I had before, but because that type of TRD color is so special, Tacomas that had that color usually commanded a little bit higher of a price. And eventually I found one that was just slightly out of my price range, same model year and everything, and I would have had to use all the insurance payout money and then a little bit extra to buy this truck. And thankfully, some very wise, loving people stepped into my life and said, Isaac, you have been blessed with so much money here. You could do a lot of different things with it. Are you sure you want to spend all of it and then some on the same exact truck? And I was like, yes, I want the same truck. And they were like, why? And I said, yeah, that's a good question. Why? So I went for a walk. I thought about it. I prayed about it. And I came to the realization that that truck, Thumper, was part of my identity. I thought when you would think of my channel, you'd think, oh, it's the guy with the cement gray Tacoma. Since I had this ongoing series with the truck and it was on merchandise, I was like, I need another truck that's exactly like that. But as I thought about that, I realized I don't want to be remembered for the pickup truck that I owned. I don't want that to define who I was. If anything, I hope that I will be remembered as someone that always pointed back to Jesus at the end of my videos. Upon having that realization, I was like, yeah, I don't need the exact same truck. I loved having a Tacoma. I loved how it drove. It doesn't matter if it's the same color or if it has all these bells and whistles. I just like another Tacoma because it was fun to drive and it was really practical too. And so I set out again after I had looked at those other cars to search for another Tacoma, admittedly thinking, well, there's no way I'm going to find a deal as good as that other one that I just passed up on. But I said, okay, God, I'm going to trust you here. And then I found my new truck. I was blown away because a lot of the options that I would have loved, but I figured like I'd never be able to get, like a sunroof. I always wanted a sunroof on my other Tacoma. I think I even talked about it in videos. I was gonna look into getting like an aftermarket one when I had saved up enough money. But this one that I just got came with it from the factory. And I thought for sure, no way, those trucks with sunroofs command such a high price, I'll never be able to find one in my price range. And then this truck appeared. And it wasn't only in my price range, it was like really in my price range that I would save quite a bit of money buying this truck. And as I mentioned, I was like, oh, I better check if it has rust. This almost seems too good to be true. But it wasn't. I am so thankful that I waited and didn't just jump on that first cement gray truck and use all of the money that I had. Because ultimately, I was able to save a little over $4,000 on this truck that I could put into savings and some bills. And it's been amazing. I am so grateful. But I had to be patient. And I didn't like being patient. I didn't want to do that initially. But it is worth it. Before I go, I'd like to share my favorite section of Scripture, maybe of all time. And I've definitely used this set of verses before on the channel, but I think it's more pertinent than ever. Matthew 6:19 through 21. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But rather, store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and rust do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. My treasure was in that truck at times. I felt like part of my identity was linked to that thing. And look, it got destroyed. Then what? Well, thankfully, I've been pointed back to the ultimate treasure. And now that I have a new Tacoma, I don't plan on doing the same thing. I was debating naming my new truck Thumper 2, because I really like the name Thumper, but ultimately I decided on Boone, because Boone means blessing. And I am so blessed to have this new Tacoma. So with that, I'll see you guys next time. And remember, no matter what vehicle you drive, I hope it lasts you a long time and it serves you well. Take care.